Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Fearless Artist Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle, and today I have the great privilege of having Robert Bosworth, trained musician, on. Robert, welcome.
Oh, hi.
Hello. Hello. I have to say, you know what? We weren't even really ready to start this episode, but we're just chatting.
Are any of us really ever ready for anything?
Wow, that's a deep way to start this episode. There we go. Maybe we should just jump right in. I know there are so many people excited for this episode. I literally woke up to DMs this morning of people saying, I can't believe you're getting Robert on your podcast. I'm so excited to hear that. Please introduce yourself to our audience, because I think, unfortunately, some people listening may not know who you are. Luckily, they're listening because everyone needs to know. That's what I think.
Well, let's let them to decide whether it's fortunate or unfortunate. And either way, I'm here. So my name is Robert Bosworth. Some, including myself, sometimes call me Robert Bosworth, trained musician.
Yeah, we're going to get into that, by the way.
Well, okay. There is a reason.
Oh, really?
But I am a... Oh, yes.
I didn't know that.
I don't know that anybody knows that. And it goes back to the unsung hero of my life, who I don't give enough credit to on a regular basis. I was born in Fort Worth, Texas, and I now live in Lexington, Kentucky, where I work and teach at the University of Kentucky, primarily with the voice students here in the University of Kentucky Opera Theater, but I also do some playing for and with the instrumental students, just much less proportionately because most of my time is in voice world. But
I can hear
I'm a
a
vocal
singer
coach.
right now in your end. That was funny. That was like perfect timing.
Oh,
I heard
I'm
I heard a
sorry.
high C come through. You're a vocal coach, pianist. You did your master's.
Yes.
Remind me, you did your master's?
Manhattan School of Music.
Right.
The proof is hiding up there behind. I recently moved some stuff around, and I think it's kind of funny that the diplomas are hidden.
Yeah, you went to MSM, and I remember that because you told me to say hi when I was there speaking last week. And then you worked in an opera program just before you went to Kentucky, right?
I did. Well, I did what is quasi, I don't know, I guess the expected route for some here. But I went into the Young Artist Program life for several years after I graduated from graduate school. So I worked with Utah Opera, Arizona Opera, and did some summer festivals as a participant as a young artist.
That's the pay-to-play stuff, right?
Not always. Sometimes I did some pay-to-play / pay-to-sings, they call it in the opera world. Yeah. But also I went to some of the programs where it's funded. Yeah. And they even give you a stipend.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Somewhat, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard various opinions about young artist programs, obviously from the singer world, because I know that they're hard to get into, and then sometimes you're paying for them, and then they don't necessarily break you into the world after you finish the 1 year, 2 year program. So I've heard multiple opinions on that. So now you're a vocal coach. You're working at University of Kentucky. I found you in, I think, December on Instagram. You just popped up into my Explore page.
And what an exploration it's been.
I mean, I was at one point literally going to your page just to laugh. I was like, who is this guy? Where is this coming from? Then I was going through a rough couple days in December. I recorded my album and totally had a mental spiral. And I was watching your stuff. I was just binging your stuff because my absolute favorite video ever is the practice video. I had that stuck in my head for weeks.
Yes.
It was extremely, for everybody who doesn't know, do you want to play it for us?
Yeah. Well, I can. It's also pinned. I don't know. Let's just let people know. I don't know what I'm doing with this microphone and anything.
Yeah, sure.
But I'll swivel us around here.
I would love that.
Hopefully
okay.
It's just an easy little pin.
If you're listening to the episode, guys, you got to go check this out on YouTube because Robert's going to play for us.
There we go. Okay. There's the thing.
Awesome. I got to make a
You recognize this?
Yes, I do recognize
That's
this.
a piano.
You know what the best thing about
This is not flattering.
meeting Instagram friends kind of in real life like this is that you see where they film their content. So when I have people come to my house.
Here.
Yeah. Mine's right here with the flower background. See? You see it?
I love it.
There we go.
I don't have my usual camera stand, which is really just a music stand turned backward. But I'm not kidding. So it goes something. I think it goes something, if I remember. Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Can you hear the... Okay, let's see what happens. All right. Remember when your teacher said you should practice more? And you said, who, me? Oh, golly gee, I've heard all this before. Allow me now to interject one tiny little thought. They probably were right, so just sit tight in the practice room tonight. You've got to practice, study your music until you bleed. Practice, this, it won't happen by itself.
Yes.
And then here's a little behind the scenes feature tidbit for you. When I did that for the reel, me hitting the wrong note was completely not intentional. And so I used the opportunity. I took the opportunity to create shtick around it.
All of us do that on stage. You mess up and you do a little dramatic flair and suddenly it's part of the performance, right? I mean, you just went with it.
Yes. You just go with it.
I start every entrepreneurship class with, we're not starving, we're thriving. And I drill this into my students' minds because, like, if there's one thing, like, I've been thinking so much about purpose in the last few years, like, what is the purpose of my life? And, like, one of the things, like, if I could eliminate the starving artist mentality, that people just readily accept that we're going to suffer because we chose music or art, or that it has to be part of it, or that you're not worth charging your wages. I mean, all of this stuff, like, this is crucial. So I'm just trying to get into their heads from the beginning, like, we're not starving, we're thriving. You're going to create your own opportunities. You're going to look for people that you enjoy working with. You're going to build a career that you like, and you don't need to dread the schedule that you decide yourself. You know, at some point I was waking up and I was like, I'm not happy with the life that I have designed. That's a problem. Like, who's in charge here? Oh yeah, it's me. Like, I got to fix it. You know, and that's, I think, what we do in the mastermind is help people to find their ikigai, which is your center of purpose.
Well, I say that all the time to my students, too, in my own way of, you are choosing to do this.
Yeah.
You are choosing to spend all this time having me yell at you. So I don't really yell. I get excited, as you know. But,
yeah, and I'm happy to talk about it. Tell me more about what is important for you to teach your students? What do you like to invest in them beyond vocal coaching? Like, what are kind of the attitudes you bring into your classroom?
Well, it's part of what I like the most about, so my job kind of wears a lot of different hats here, at least. But pretty much wherever I am, if it's my, in my purview to help be a leader in that way, I try to keep the standard pretty high, what I think is an achievable standard, but I do like pushing people because I think it's, quite frankly, a waste of time not to.
Yeah.
And they all have it within themselves, even if they don't know it yet. They really do. And everybody's level of success and, it's like when I go to do the grades at the end of the semester, it's like, how do you grade someone on art or on music? And my general rule of thumb that I try to do is if I can tell that they've been putting in consistent effort and that their level of progress has been consistent, it doesn't matter if, it's not like they're not as good as somebody else. It's not that kind of thing. It's just, as a teacher, and I'm sure you know this from your coaching, you can tell when people are doing their version of 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's how I try to approach it. I try to get people to do their version of 100% every day, knowing that some days that 100% is going to be, another day's 80%.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
But you just have to show up and do it and keep working hard.
Why do you think that's so important to cultivate in your students?
Because they have to do that for themselves once they're out of school. And again, anything less than that, I think, is kind of a waste of time. I mean, it's, whether you even do a career in music or if you don't end up doing a career in music and any sort of creative endeavor takes so much time.
Yeah.
Which is obvious probably to most people listening to this. Because I imagine the demographic are creative sorts or those who know that there's never really a firm finish line.
Yeah, exactly.
But we can keep striving to push ourselves.
Do you do that for yourself too? Like, do you keep setting the bar higher for yourself in your own work?
I do. I went through a period of time, so I am not freshly out of young artist world. And there was a little bit of, after I stopped having a consistent teacher and mentor figure for my own how to play and how to coach and all that sorts of stuff, you have to figure it out for yourself and think about what works for you. And I went through a period of time where I got pretty comfortable letting the bar be where it was. And I think being a teacher has really helped me realize that. I realized I could do better. I have always, I've been playing the piano and had been a musician. Literally, I have no memory of not doing it. I started very early, and whether that was singing and playing, picking up a few other instruments along the way, I've just always done music. I have never not done music. And so And I recognize too, I think it's important, what I try to get my students to realize too, is that there is a humble way to acknowledge the gifts that you already have.
Okay, we got to unpack that. I mean, because that's like one of the major limiting beliefs that I've struggled with my whole life is like acknowledging that you have a gift and owning it without worrying that you're being bragging or arrogant. And I was so pushed down and taught to like, don't accept compliments, don't accept praise, don't let your head get big, to the point that I was so insecure that when I got praise, I would immediately dismiss it. I still do immediately dismiss a lot of it, unfortunately. And then I had no confidence, even though I was getting praise. So it was like, at some point I realized, like, wait a second, like if I put this puzzle piece into this empty spot, then I would be filled. I'm getting good feedback. It should help build my confidence that like I'm doing good work, but I was unable to receive, so I couldn't be secure.
We all go through different periods of life, and I've gone through periods probably more than once where I have experienced similar things too. But again, I think in the process of being a mentor to other people, that invites a lot of self-reflection and a lot of having to verbalize how I go about things too. And I think I'm in a better place now where I can humbly acknowledge things with technique about playing the piano.
Yeah.
I am pretty naturally gifted. I'm not anybody's like virtuoso pianist, but in terms of just sitting down and playing something, I usually and always kind of have not really struggled with technical issues to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you're whipping off these like Broadway-esque skits on Instagram too, it got a lot of attention because it's just so fun that you can do that.
Well, and I've listened to enough music throughout my whole life from a lot of different genres that all that's just in my brain, all that different kind of music. And so my ears are really good.
Yeah.
And I say that very humbly because I think you can risk going too far and becoming pompous about what you're gifted at.
Right.
But there's a way and a necessary level that we all have to realize what we bring to the table. And also keep in mind what we work on, what we need to work on. Because I have plenty of things I still need to work on.
You say you're gifted, but like, it's not really that. It's like you were given a gift and now you've crafted the gift. So that you can own. Like, you don't need to like humbly say that. You can be like, I put the work in. Like, I deserve the recognition for that. Just like your master's diploma is hanging on the wall, you know?
Well, and some of those things, yeah, like the things that I've had to work at, yeah, I have had to put the work in. Like
exactly.
a lot of the, language skills that we do as vocal coaches. I wasn't born knowing all that, so I had put the work in on that. But some things have always just come kind of easily to me.
And that just reminds me, I mean, I wanted to do this at the end of the episode, but like we did a collab reel where you asked your fan base to send in questions, and that reminds me a lot of what somebody asked. One of the questions that came in for you on Instagram was, what is the difference in music between someone that is gifted and someone that is able to work really, really hard? And I think we're already touching on that if you want to answer that.
Well, to some extent, I don't think there is a difference. There
Really?
is a difference.
Okay.
Well, there is a difference and there's not, because I think you can have somebody who's very gifted and does not work hard.
Right. Yeah.
But then you can have somebody who is maybe gifted in different ways, but works harder than the people who are already naturally gifted. They're going to go farther.
Right. I think that's what the question is getting at. I know you and I have talked personally about like not coddling students and how we both feel that we were excellent as children and got stuff very quickly. So then later it became harder to learn to work because so much stuff came naturally or instinctively. I think a lot of people listening probably have that. Like, you were just naturally gifted or good at music. If you come from a small town, then you instantly become the best in town because there's not very many people around you. And then, me personally, I went to Montreal and I was totally crushed in a good way by my teacher who like rebuilt me. But the crushing happened. And I know you had shared something similar.
Yeah. So, I mean, part of that is I'm an only child. So I never had siblings to compete with in terms of anything, but especially, other siblings being musicians, or there was never that kind of sibling rivalry I hear.
I totally see you as coming from like a Sound of Music childhood. So too bad you don't have 6 siblings to sing with you in harmony,
If all of those 7 kids were rolled into one, that's me.
But like, when did you learn to do the work?
In school, probably once I got into a bigger pond.
Yeah.
Yeah, specifically once I started when I was in New York for grad school.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
Because both my focus was changing to more collaborative studies, which were newer to me and less refined. And it was also just a way bigger pond than I had ever been in before.
Yeah, for sure. So to answer the question, you already said you think someone who can work hard will go further than the person who's just naturally gifted and maybe to do anything with that.
Oh, for sure. And I think there's less probability of burnout. if the person has strong work ethic and doesn't just rely on their gifts to get them through, there's more of a drive in there that will see them through moments of potential burnout.
Okay. You don't think that it's the drive that would contribute to burnout because people are overworking themselves?
Well, it certainly can be.
Mm-hmm.
I just think, you know, having been someone who sometimes has rested on their laurels in the past, with further reflection, I've noticed I have not been happy in those times when I am not pushing myself.
Yeah.
Now you have to push yourself within reason, because then it goes the opposite end.
Right.
But, I think we all probably know those people who are just kind of naturally gifted at things and tend to coast a little bit.
Yeah.
And I would wager that they're probably not as fulfilled feeling as the people who know that their results are coming from their work.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Another question that came in for you was who trained you? So maybe you want to introduce us to the trained musician part of your name. And the second half is, would you recommend your job to a young person starting out as a good career choice? But I mean, you've already said that you do multiple things.
Well, the name comes from my wife. Her name is Maris. And she, like me, is a trained musician. She and I were the only two piano performance majors in our undergrad at the time. And she later got what are those called? Master's degree in collaborative piano from Illinois Champaign-Urbana. So we both basically have the same career path before we started having kids. And she is, by her choice, very happily full-time mom right now to our two kids, two girls. But there was an anecdote that she shared when she was still very active. I think it was when we were living in Utah, that she said, "Oh, don't worry, I'm a trained accompanist. It's fine. I'm a trained accompanist. Everything will be fine." So that's kind of where the name comes from.
Okay. I love that.
But yeah, I grew up, like I said, playing as long as I can remember. I started with a neighborhood teacher named Rosemary Solomon in Fort Worth. And then my family moved out of Fort Worth and to a very small town called Midlothian, Texas, which is kind of in between Fort Worth and Dallas. And rather than find a teacher in Dallas, because it was a little closer to Dallas, my dad ended up just being my primary teacher all the way through high school. So my, fifth grade through the end of high school. Oh, wow.
That's actually like the most important years is the high school year.
Yeah. Well, and it was an interesting ride. I mean, we had a lot of, and he, to his credit, he was the first person to say, if this ever doesn't work out and if you want to switch teachers, we can investigate that. Like, he was not like, you must study with me, that kind of thing. But it worked out enough and things were fine. And so he became my main teacher for those years. Well, now he is a very good pianist. He's not a career musician, but he got a master's in viola performance. He's had a very wide range of educational background, but his career ended up being as an Episcopal priest.
Oh, okay.
Actually, so that's what that was his job. But he's also just a great musician. He plays organ and volunteers all the time, and his ears are insane. But anyway, he was my teacher for then. Then I did my undergrad degree here, actually, University of Kentucky, where I studied with Irina Voro. And then I did my master's in collaborative with Warren Jones at the Manhattan School of Music.
Okay, I've got a few more questions here. So tell me, would you recommend your job to a young person?
It's a loaded question, and I think my job right now is a fantastic job for someone who's done this a while, a little bit. For someone just starting out in collaborative piano or vocal coaching, no, I would not, because you need to be proficient enough with what you're talking about to be a teacher. And there's just so much that goes into, the languages, the style, the repertoire. There's just a lot of that to get under your belt that if people are thinking about it at a young, and again, what do you call young? Like fresh out of school? Probably not. I would try to get some experience first.
Yeah.
And most places are going to want that.
Okay, next question, which I appreciated this one. How do you define fearlessness in music or in your life as a musician? Is fearlessness in music a skill that can be learned and developed over a lifetime of training?
Yes, it can be learned and developed. And I think a lot of the times has to be learned and developed.
So how have you learned and developed fearlessness?
Experience and jumping in the deep end, as I call it. You just have to, or rip the Band-Aid off. I say that a lot too. You just have to rip the Band-Aid off, embrace the uncomfortable, And I've always just been a better learner by doing.
Mm-hmm.
I was always invited to go observe people's lessons and observe all this. And I would do that unless I was the one doing it and slamming things against the wall and seeing how to figure it out. It was not as successful as a learning opportunity as those things were. As uncomfortable as it was sometimes when I would fall on my face. But I'm a big believer that you each time you fall on your face, especially in a public setting, you get a little more fearless. One of my audition for Manhattan School, or maybe it was for Music Academy of the West. I get them confused because my eventual teacher was in both those auditions, so I mix them up in my head. But for that audition, they had a bunch of repertoire that was required to prepare for the audition. And they had stuff listed like, choose this excerpt or this excerpt from this section. Choose this excerpt and this excerpt from blah, blah, blah. Well, I got my ands and my ors mixed up. And the night before I flew to New York, I was rereading over the things like a diligent little person and said, okay, I'll just make sure I have all my rep ready to go. And then lo and behold, I had in my brain read the word or where it said and.
Oh.
I had completely disregarded one of the selections that was fair for them to call for, which happened to be Micaela's aria from Carmen. Which, if you don't know it, I mean, it's got a kind of screwy left-hand cello line that repeats over and over. And it just, you can sight read it maybe, but it's not where I wanted it to be. So I had full-on meltdown, panic attack. But I said, you know what? I'm still going to go do the audition. And hopefully, I think part of me was like, hopefully it won't come up. And we'll just that'll solve that problem. Well, then it came up in the audition. Of course it did. And in the spur of the moment, I hadn't planned on doing this, but I just said, hey, I will be happy to play that for you. I will let you know that I misread the thing. And it's not as prepared as I would like it to be, but I'll be happy to do it since it's there. That's on me. Own up to it. And I did. And I eventually got into that program. And I wonder if part of me getting into the program was because I was so upfront about it. And I wasn't trying to put on some sort of pretense for not being what I was.
Okay. That's interesting.
Or not being what I wasn't.
That's an interesting strategy. I don't know what I would have done in that situation. Definitely would have had the meltdown. Okay, next question. How do you approach practice? Do you have any specific rituals or routines you adhere by? What advice do you have for musicians just getting started?
I think the best advice I can think of for people just getting started with developing a practice routine is that there is no right or wrong answer. But there are certainly things that are more helpful than others in terms of, all the tips you can find out there about, put your phone away, get off your social media stuff, use the Pomodoro technique, which if you don't know is this thing where you set a timer for 20 minutes and focus on one task, take a little breather, and do it again. And you do 4 of those, I think, and it's one Pomodoro or something. People can look that up and get more accurate info about that. But when it comes down to it, I think if any of those things don't work for you in your practice routine, don't beat yourself up over it. It just doesn't work for you. It's okay. So, and your practice routine is going to change throughout your life, depending on what else is going on in your life. One thing I talk about with my students a lot is learning how to juggle all the demands of life, and that the demands that you have to juggle are going to change. For instance, we have, in the last 7 months since our second daughter has been with us, I've had to relearn how to juggle because there's a whole other giant element at play. And that affects the practice routine. When can you practice? How much practicing now is more score studying instead of actually at the piano?
What is something that is really effective for you to learn that maybe surprises you now that you've learned how to juggle?
I think there's less time to waste. And so making the most out of the 15-minute snippets of practice that you can get in between things.
Yeah.
And really just going into hyper intensive focus mode for those 15 minutes and being on yourself with, no, I'm not going to play that again and not mark the fingering down and think I'm just going to remember it. I'm going to put that I'm using my 4th finger on that note and not be ashamed to do that. Right.
Interesting. Not be ashamed. So do you think in the past?
In the past, I have thought if I've looked at a piece that is similar to a piece that I've done before, I used to have this kind of, and I have to remind myself this too now, but, I've seen this before. I shouldn't have to remember to do that. I've done this. on a different piece. That's so unreasonable. If you stop and think of, like, why is that? It's a whole different context. It's a whole different composer. Just because it's, this sort of scalar passage in this piece doesn't mean that just because I did it on another piece, it's going to be flawless this time without trying.
So what caught my attention is without being ashamed. What else do you do now where you're just like, I don't have time to have this inner critic, internal dialogue thing happen? Like, because I recognize it a bit in myself too. Like I was learning Aaron Copland songs this morning for a rehearsal, and I mean, typically I'd be like, oh, like berating myself for whatever's not working, and I was like, I don't have time for that. Like I just need to like learn this thing,
Yeah, you just got to get it done. Yeah, like marking stuff in my score, meter change. Well, it usually has to do with like the notes that I make to myself in a score.
Okay.
If there's a meter change, if there's like our piece that we're doing in opera workshop class right now has a ton of meter changes all over the place, and I'm writing all of them in there.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm finding that I missed one, and so I'm like, oh. But I don't trust myself to remember all of it as I once did. And I think there used to be something in my brain that was like, oh, you should be better than have to make that reminder for yourself again on paper, which is just so asinine.
Yeah.
Like I would never say that to any of my students. Why am I saying that to myself?
Okay, good. I love that. I mean, obviously I wanted to talk to you because of your social media. I'm always interested in people who are willing to share online. So I'd love to hear like the thought process behind like, because I think you started doing this recently. I think when I found you were at 2,000 or 3,000 followers, and I told you like, this is going to blow up. Because I mean, what you're doing is funny, it's relatable, it's super high quality. You're writing these little jingles, you've got funny words, comments are blowing up. I mean, everyone's just like, this is so awesome. We totally love this. Like, where did this come from? How do you feel now that you're in it?
It's a little surreal now that I'm certainly not like the most popular page by far that's out there.
You haven't been doing it
but
for
I
so
have
long,
gotten recognized in public.
Yeah. Oh yeah, really?
Now, which is strange. I finally got my real ID instead of just my plain old driver's license because it's about to expire. And the clerk who was working with me on getting all that done, I walked up and he said, "Have we met before?" And I said, "I don't think so. I don't think so. I hope not, because I'm going to be embarrassed if I don't remember you." And he said, "Do you play piano by chance?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I do." He's like, "I follow you on Instagram." And I was like, "Oh, well, thank you for doing so." So that was a bit surreal, but I'm just really, most of the little silly songs are just thoughts that either occur on that. It takes about 20 minutes to drive here in the mornings, depending on traffic, to school. So I either just turn all the radio and everything off and just kind of see what could I think of in the drive or in the shower where my most profound thinking happens, and just kind of slap it together. And sometimes they're just purely frivolous things. Sometimes they're things that I tried to intentionally make relevant in terms of the musician's experience. Like there was a recent one I had about that moment before an audition where you totally just don't want to do it anymore. And of course you have to go to the bathroom, and it's, you just want to go home to your mom again. Like, please stop.
Yeah.
And then some others are more direct. There was one back in the fall about,
Why on Instagram and you should be practicing. Close your phone and get to work.
There's that one.
That's one of my favorites.
There's the ones I try to have a little bit of element of fun, but also some.
Okay, but why are you doing this? Sometimes. Why? Because I know so many musicians. Like,
why am I doing?
Yeah.
I don't really know.
What compels
it's
you
fun
to?
for me?
Okay,
well,
yeah.
It's a creative outlet in a different way for me. So, as in my current job, I'm usually interpreting other people's work and trying to help people interpret other people's work. This is purely my own thing that I'm just kind of thinking of.
You're doing it on a creative outlet that risks being seen and judged by, like, you have 1.7 million views on that reel that I just sang. So so many musicians listening right now will want to have a creative outlet, but they don't want to share with the world. Like, why are you sharing? And like, I'm so glad you are, because like I already said how much I love your page, but like.
Well, at some element, I've always been a big ham, so that's part of it. And I've had experience being on stage as a performer in terms of like musicals and things like that. So, it's not like the venture into these things on Instagram was like the first time being that, I don't know, open or tearing down that fourth wall. Although it did take getting used to. I mean, I film it, like I said, I just put my phone on a music stand and have the reverse camera on. And so I'm seeing myself as I do it because I try to, look at the phone as much as possible and not down on my hands, just to help engage better with whoever is watching. And the first several weeks of that was a little unnerving, and I would spend a lot more time than I am proud to admit making takes of these things to try to get it just right and make it perfect. And then at some point along that, I can't remember which one it was, but there was one that I decided to just, I'm tired of this. I'm just going to put it up how it is and whatever. And that was one of the more popular ones at that time. And so I thought, oh, people either aren't noticing that something is screwy about it that I noticed, or they choose not to care because the whole part of it is worthy enough or appreciated enough. And so I think that after just trying to self-censor less, I kind of just throw stuff out there now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just dropped a golden nugget, which is most musicians are zeroing in on things that most people don't notice who are watching. So we are being introduced to, first of all, you as a person, you're coming across our page for the first time, we're hearing that you're singing and playing. We're not paying attention to the nuances that you are as the creator of it. So many musicians hold themselves back from actually hitting post because they hear that out of tune note or phrase or whatever. And I don't know. I don't even know what the percentage is of people don't see it, but they don't notice it. So how sad is that people are withholding sharing their gifts and reaching? I mean, you're building a community. And that's what I love about your page is that you've blown up within the musician world. People, we talk about you. We're like, oh yeah, did you see Robert's latest reel?
Oh.
Because it's so relatable and it makes us all feel seen and understood because it's jokes that only we understand, right? So you're creating community, which I think is the most valuable reason to be on social media as a musician is to create your community. It's not to go viral. You can go viral for anything. It doesn't mean that you're building real connection. Yeah.
And I've had a part of the best time that I've had out of it is the conversations that I've started to have with people I never would have met otherwise. So like you and, people in Scotland, people in Africa. I mean, there's all over the place. People have seen. I mean, Kristen Chenoweth liked one of my reels one time, and I tried to tag her, but she, I guess, was too busy to get back to me. But that's okay. I'm kidding. But it's just sometimes it's crazy how wide-reaching some of it has gotten. But the conversations that have delved into getting to know people more has been really a great fun.
Where do you see it going? Where would you like to see it go?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just going to keep doing it and kind of take it where it goes, which is kind of how I've always lived my life is, I've never really been a 5-year, 10-year plan person.
No, I know. But ideally you must imagine it would be cool if it became like this, or I know you've talked.
I mean, if somebody started giving me money for it for some reason, I wouldn't turn that down. As long as I could still have it be totally my thing that I wanted to do whatever I wanted to do with. I wouldn't want to sell it out to anything. Right. But, should somebody say, hey, for instance, I arrange piano Christmas duets for Maris and I to play every year. And a few people reached out and said, hey, can I buy the sheet music from that this past year? And I said, oh, let me go polish up that sheet music real quick and send it to you. And you can send me some money. That's great.
I'm glad you mentioned that because monetizing your Instagram as a musician can just mean that you get more work opportunities because you're being visible. So it's not that we're doing brand deals or getting sponsored posts. It's that you get hired to teach someone's kid lessons. You find students, or you sell digital products like your arrangements, or people go stream your album. I mean, Instagram is a monetization tool for us in so many different ways. I've gotten new work opportunities, new concert opportunities. I created content for an app in India during COVID times that was paid, all sorts of stuff. So you want to monetize your arranging skills, as you're saying. That's another way you can get hired out. What are some other exciting things that have come? You're mentioning relationships, selling your digital products.
Yeah, the community building has been fun. And seeing that some of the things that I've experienced in my career are so universal to our music community. And that some of the issues, if we want to say the issues in the industry, are not just unique to America, for example, which is what my career has been solely based in, has been America. But having people from who now work in Germany, for instance, message me and say, oh my gosh, this is the most relatable thing I've ever seen in my life. And I'm like, oh, really? Is it the same over there?
Interesting.
And then I'm like, oh, you wouldn't believe it. And for good things and things that need improvement. So it works both ways. But just, I think I think extending to I also talk to my students a lot about, you got to get out of your bubble. We all can get sucked into the same bubble, but we got to play in other people's bubbles sometimes in order to actually grow and understand more about everything.
What is your message to your students, your community? What is the message, Robert Bosworth, trained musician?
Go practice. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I really am big on this idea that there's no one correct path for people. I think especially, and again, I can speak to my experience in America because that's what I've done career-wise. I think there's a lot of assumption that you have to go immediately to grad school, and you have to immediately go into young artist program circuit, and you have to immediately then get management, and you have to blah, 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 blah. Well, I appreciate the people like you and like Deanna, who you had on a few weeks ago, Deanna Braywick, and other people of roughly the same generation who are out there active, who are making much more diversified careers, and they're being seen as legitimate and seen as, oh, that's a right way to do something, right versus wrong, instead of, people get such in a tizzy, understandably, especially if they're younger, about, oh, I didn't win XYZ competition. I might as well just give it up. If I don't go through that door, then there's no way I can have a fulfilling career. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate all of the number of people who are out there now trying to break that down through their example. And not just by preaching it all the time, but just kind of living these lives that reflect the reality of careers aren't just cookie cutter.
Yeah.
They're whatever you want them to be. And you can have children in a fulfilled career, which I did not used to think was possible. I kind of, when I was in, I was a little scared for what that would mean to my career once upon a time, because I knew I wanted kids and even just a stable marriage. I kind of thought, oh Lord, I'm going to have to choose between a performing career and a marriage. That's such bunk. Yeah. You just got to make sure that you know what you're doing and what you want and prioritize what your priorities are. And it's hard, but it's doable. It's certainly doable.
I think what you just shared is so powerful. Multiple ways of success, multiple ways of creating a career, your values, family, kids. Many of our listeners have families and kids. Deanna's got 2.5. And we love in our community being able to see so many musicians who are doing different things and finding fulfillment doing different things, building their own careers, getting their compositions performed, working in project management, starting their own initiatives, starting opera projects, pitching ideas. I mean, creatives have ideas, and that's why we believe so fully in community, because it's in community that you can refine those ideas, that you can get good feedback, and then most of all, the accountability, which is necessary if you want to actually do something, because a lot of us are isolated on our own, and it's like, I've got all these ideas, I don't know where to start, and I definitely don't have someone checking in with me every couple of weeks and be like, hey, how's it going with that big thing you want to do?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think it goes to, your I forget which episode it was recently, but when you listed the things and I messaged you and I said, number 5 especially.
10 hard things I learned in 2024, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and number 5 was something like, you can do multiple different things and be good at all of them.
Pursue excellence in everything. Yes, exactly. Because, yes. I had a pianist tell me once, I'm doing a master's in conducting, but I don't really want to tell very many people because then I don't want to give the impression that I'm not a serious pianist. And I'm like, wait, what?
Yes.
Those two things are so connected. Like, how could you possibly, I could understand if he was like, I'm going to go be like construction worker. Don't tell any, but it's like conductor. That's only going to help your piano playing. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah. And for me, my opinion of that too, if you further that, is that I enjoy that my job has so many different hats. Yeah. I would be so bored if I was only a rehearsal pianist. Right. And I never really helped mentor people. Yeah. Or if I just did one of those things that I mentioned earlier all the time. Yeah. And then the happy byproduct, since that makes me more fulfilled, is that I'm then more marketable. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so like the same goes to that conducting and pianist person that you mentioned. They're now going to be more marketable as a happy byproduct because they are feeding their multiple interests and developing them.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. This has been so super helpful. Okay, let's get to the action point. What's the one thing that people need to do after hearing this episode?
I would say, well, it sounds like an old fuddy-duddy thing, but the world moves so fast, right? And you sometimes don't have time to stop and actually reflect on things. But kind of going in line with what we've been talking about, I mean, just try to figure out what are some of the things that you want your life to look like. And see, know that that's fine. Unless it goes against your morals, whatever those are. There's not really right and wrong so much as it seems like there is sometimes, I would say. And you can craft, career-wise, you can craft a career that serves your priorities with the other aspects of your life. And for some people, that's purely career, and that's fine. They can go do that. For me, it's not that. Like I said, there's the personal life, having friends and having a family that's hopefully, healthy and functioning properly, our view of properly. And just knowing that there's so much more subjectivity to all of that than what maybe seems to be preached in culture sometimes. And in order to find that out, you just have to schedule the time for yourself to sit with yourself in an empty room with no distractions and just let your mind kind of ruminate and think of, what does that look like for me?
Mm-hmm.
And be honest with yourself and just kind of, as much as you can, craft your surroundings to cater those priorities.
Yeah, it's so good. And with that includes having people, I think, doing the thing that you want to do, to have your vision so clear, like, oh, that's what it looks like to be that age, having a performing career, or being a mom and a performing violist like Deanna. Or like, I know for me, watching female speakers for the last 5 years, it has given me so much confidence when I get on stage, when I'm presenting. It's like, okay, I've seen this done so many times by other women. I've been paying attention to what they talk about, what they do. I think that's also why I believe in so much in sharing. And that's why we started this podcast, because we wanted to have these deeper conversations and let people know, like, hey, this is what it looks like and this is what's possible for you. So like, we need to dream bigger.
Well, and if I can just add to that, knowing that it always is subject to change too. I mean, I think a lot, what I see in my students a lot, and many of them are, the undergrads are 21, 20, and they're about to go out and be finished with their bachelor, and they feel like they have to know what they want out of their career. No, you don't.
Yeah.
You don't have to know. If it takes you 20 more years to figure out what your career looks like, that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no timeline on it. Everybody's on their own thing. But go ahead and do the work to try to figure out what you want to do, but just know that you don't have to commit to it and not have that change. Like, the person who wants to add on a conducting thing. Mm-hmm. Sure, do that. Maybe you didn't know that you used to be interested in that.
Yeah. That's good.
Why
I
not?
love that. That sounds pretty fearless to me.
Yeah.
Robert, I want to say thanks for coming on today.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing your wisdom.
Anytime.
Where can people find you? How can we follow you? Give us all the details.
People keep saying I need to get a TikTok, but honestly, I can't be bothered. So I'm on Instagram currently at Robert Bosworth Music. Technically, I think there are periods between each of those things, but I don't know if that matters. You should find my beaming face as the picture that comes up. And yeah, if you start following, please, I welcome DMs and comments, and I love knowing that people are amused or provoked somehow to think about something that my wacky brain has inspired them to think about, or even, like you said, just giving a laugh. But I like making people laugh too, so that's fun.
Awesome.
But yeah, Instagram's the main place.
Great.
Right now.
Cool. Well, thanks for today, and we'll catch you in your next. My favorite is your skit with the teacher and the pianist and the singers, by the way. So.
Yes. They will be back. Don't worry.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Fearless Artist Podcast. Be fearless.